Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. And welcome to this Youth Foresight Knowledge Sharing webinar, jointly organized by the UNICEF and the ILO, and dedicated to the theme of micro-credentials for youth and work. So we have a very well-packed session. I am Pedro Moreno de Fonseca, lifelong learning specialist from the International Labor Organization, and have been working on this issue of qualifications and micro-credentials for a while now. I'm joined by a very exciting set of speakers, some youth testimonials, some experts will help us navigate this discussion. This is in fact part of an ongoing and rich discussion around the value and the use of micro-credentials. We're going to look a little bit more in depth about in terms of what this means for youth, what are the potentials, what is the promise, what is being delivered, what can be done to improve what is currently also being done with micro-credentials. This webinar also comes at a time where we have just published a joint report on the same theme, cooperation between UNICEF and the ILO, which is available, and you will have the link shared in a message that is going to be sent to you. So I also already invite you to also take a look into the results of this study. Picking up on what are micro-credentials for, just to refresh the memory of people who are attending the webinar, we're essentially talking about representations of verified learning achievements of small dimension, which are really independent from the way in which people have acquired their skills, the knowledge, the attitudes that are being verified and recognized in these small size credentials. This means that they can be many, many things. They can be, not very frequently, they are certificates relating to small courses, but they can be also small bits of certification linked to recognition of prior learning processes. They can be professional certificates for specific skill sets. So they can be many things. And also very relevantly, they can be small qualifications that can be stacked and built into bigger qualifications. So, of course, this means that they are very flexible. There's a lot of potential in them. They can be delivered digitally. They can be used to break down existing courses and qualifications. And so for that, they are said to be highly empowering for both individuals and organizations. They can lead to gains in productivity. They can be a huge equalizer if proper implemented in terms of access of people to skills and lifelong learning opportunities. But there are many lingering questions. One of them is quite simply, what are the impacts? And in this session, we're going to specifically try to understand what are the impacts for youth. Are they relevant, and which ones are these? Another one which is also important is really what is the state of readiness of countries, of national systems to make quality offerings for young people? And also, can we truly harness the potential of micro-credentials to raise the employability, to raise the career opportunities for youth? These are questions that we're going to explore with our speakers today. And turning exactly to our speakers, we're going to start by hearing the voices of youth, of dynamic youth that has been engaged in work with micro-credentials. We have three young people, very dynamic young people here who are willing to share their experience with us. We have Yasmin Sibahi. She's from Côte d'Ivoire, and she's a young woman who is very committed to education, to youth employability, to community engagement. She's a member of GenU's Young People's Action Team. She's a YOMA ambassador, and she is an active promoter of micro certifications. Just wave your hand so that we know exactly who you are. Also with us, we have Sophia Helal, who's a young leader from Egypt, and she is a member of the Passport to Earning digital skilling platform youth advisory group. That's a mouthful, but it's important. And Gen U's Young People's Action Team. So welcome, Sophia, so you can also give us the nod. We also have with us Shivansh Shalab, who's a 19-year-old innovator in education technology. He comes from India. He's leading an production development of AI-powered solutions through his own startup, Edu AI. He's also a Gen U Young People's Action Team member and a big advocate of Microcredentials. So perhaps we would start from hearing from Yasmin. Yasmin, could you please share a bit of your experience, your testimonial?
Hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Yasmin. Go ahead.
Okay. I am Yasmin Sibayi. I am a white part from Côte d'Ivoire, and I'm glad to share my experience to the impact of micro-certification in the professional journey of young people. In a constantly evolving world, accessing to job market in a major challenge for youth. Faced with a mismatch between academic training and market needs, micro-certification emerged as a promising solution. They offer flexible learning opportunities and allow young people to quickly acquire specific skills that are often sought after by employers. I have personally explored this approach from various platforms such as Coursera, LinkedIn Learning, and specific Yoma. Yoma is an online platform that offers free certification program. Thanks to Yoma, I have taken several courses and obtained certification in key area. I have also had the opportunity to help another young people discover and adopt this type of learning. At first, it wasn't easy. Learning remotely requires a good internet connection, a good environment, and above all, a lot of discipline. But over time, I realized that certification are a real asset. They have allowed to strengthen my skills, acquire new knowledge, and better position myself professionally. The advantages of online certification include the accessibility anytime and anywhere. Many are free and the flexible learning format. You can rewatch videos if you don't understand something. There is no need to travel and you receive a certification upon completion. However, certification do not replace diploma, and there is no point in accumulating countless certification that are often willing to personal and professional aspiration. I think that it is crucial to choose useful and beneficial certification. They provide knowledge, but it is essential to apply it in practice. Having a certificate is a plus, but hands-on experience and application remain key. In short, I think that micro-certification are a powerful tool for enhancing youth employability, provide they are strategical, chosen based and our career goals. I think that it is all. Thank you for this opportunity. It is me, Yasmin.
Thank you very much, Yasmin, for a testimonial. I'm going to move on to Sophia now, and I ask you please to keep time because we have very packed program and a lot of people to speak. So, Sophia, from your perspective, can you give us your testimonial from Egypt and the work that you have been developing, your activity? Can you please give us some insights as well? You are muted. You are muted, Sophia. We cannot hear you for some reason. So perhaps while you are while we see if we can solve this, let's move on to Shivansh. Shivansh, so can you tell us from your work in your startup and your perspectives also in these important groups you're engaged in, please?
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm Shivansh, and I totally agree with what Yasmin shared. And I would like to reinforce a few of those ideas about how micro-credentials are a great resource, but we need to make sure that they are high quality and relevant to the real world skills. So we know that access to quality education and skill trainings isn't available to everyone. Many people, whether due to financial limitations, time constraints, or other barriers, can't pursue traditional educations or formal trainings. So for people in these situations, micro-credentials are a game changer. They offer flexibility, accessibility, and most importantly, the opportunity to learn in-demand skills that can truly make a difference in their careers. But it's not just about collecting certifications, as Yasmin said too. What really matters is the quality and relevance of these courses. In today's fast paced world, industries are evolving rapidly and education needs to keep up. So there is no point in having a stacked resume full of certifications if you are still struggling with using those skills in an interview or applying those skills in a real world setting. So that's why micro credentials must be industry relevant and application based, ensuring learners gain not just theoretical knowledge, but also practical, hands on experience that truly prepares them for the workforce. At the same time, we can't overlook the confidence boosts that comes with learning something new and being able to apply it. Micro credentials don't just teach skills, they open doors. They provide opportunities for people from all backgrounds to grow, transition into new careers, and take control of their own learning journeys. So, as we continue to expand and refine micro credential programs, it's crucial to focus on quality, accessibility, and real world impact. Because at the end of the day, education isn't just about what you know, it's about what you can do with what you know. And that's the real power of micro credentials, I feel.
So this is excellent. We already have a lot of good points here being raised. The actual value for integration in the labor market, in workplaces, so the relevance for industry, but also the relevance for the person taking ownership of your own destiny. Let's put it like this. Also, points from Yasmin in terms of not being a replacement for a diploma. Again, matching personal interests with the interests of the employers. I think we're going to explore even more these issues. Sophia, are we good to now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Excellent.
Perfect. So if I'm going to talk about my experience with micro-credentials, I have completed micro-credential courses through many programs like P2E, Learning Passport, Microsoft, Police Academy, etc. They offered me opportunities to acquire critical knowledge and develop tangible skills, empowering me in ways I never really thought possible. Through their courses, I built a kind of foundation of confidence and competence that allowed me to engage fully and effectively with Genu's goals. The rationale behind these platforms is very clear. It bridges the gap between ambition and the ability by equipping youth with the tools needed to navigate the complexities of education and employment. Um, my experience during last year, I completed different courses that enhanced my knowledge and skills, especially in important areas, such as planning, time management, strategic thinking, SWOT analysis, and mentoring, and evaluation. And my understanding and contribution changed very dramatically because of my accessibility to these courses. The impact has been very profound, and it helped me transition from being a participant to a contributor, like today, transforming me into a more knowledgeable, efficient, and resilient advocate for youth empowerment. And I am now able to work collaboratively, think critically, and lead with purpose. Skills that have become invaluable not only to my work with Genu, but also to my attitude and personal initiative. And I believe that investing in micro-credential programs for young people is very essential. Early exposure to such learning opportunities for people in my age and younger ensures that young people are better prepared to thrive in their future careers. When we make these courses accessible to all, we empower a generation of skilled and confident leaders. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. This was very, very refreshing, and you have me convinced. If I hear you, you definitely are a contributor, and you have excellent argumentation and communication skills. But I like very much the points that you made, about the confidence boost and this development of targeted skill sets. This is, of course, very important. So now let's take these points, a little bit of these points, and ask our experts in the room, what are the ins and outs of this discussion, if this is all only flowers, or if we're talking about difficulties as well. So for that, we do have a very good panel of experts with us. We have Peter Codier who's the Secretary General from the All Africa Students Union with us. We also have Bassam Nasir, who is an education specialist from UNICEF. Good to see you again, Bassam. We have James Keavy, who is a researcher and also one of the authors of the Micro-Credentials for Youth and Work study that I mentioned at the beginning. And we have also the pleasure of having with us Norrin Fitzpatrick, who's a manager of enterprise employees and skills at the Further Education Authority of Ireland, which has a long experience with micro-credentials. So, we've heard really, really exciting and motivating testimonials from youth. So, Peter, maybe I start with you. You're a bit here the voice of organized youth, and in no less than for a full continent, an important continent, which is a young continent, and like many other parts of the globe, which are not necessarily as young as Africa. And you've heard all that is being said. These were very positive testimonials, but I would like to ask you, do you think that micro-credentials really respond to the aspirations and needs of youth? Or is it for all youth? Are there differences we should be paying attention? Can they be more useful in some cases than others? I would really like to hear from you, Peter. Can you?
Thank you very much, Pedro. So, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go on.
Okay, all right. So, thank you very much, and I'll also take the opportunity to thank Yasmin, Shivansh, and then Sophia for sharing the perspectives. And I think that what they have done is to speak to the practical benefits as there are with the micro credentials. And so we've heard from them, and we've heard from people who have benefited from this. And I think that it tells a story about just how beneficial it could be if it worked in the way that we intended it. Just to be able to support what they have already said, from the point of view of young people, when we do meet, we do have a sense that we live in a world which is very different. It's different in so many ways as we have known it. And I think that one of the major things is that we see that it's very disruptive It's disruptive in the sense that you do not possess a skill set that is useful over time or perpetually. But you'd find that almost every other time you are required to upskill and then retool. And so what is key is that if it remains only a traditional pathway to learn, it would mean that a lot more people would miss out on the possibility to retool and upskill in the limited time that they have. And of course, particularly so if you consider persons that are displaced from wherever they are. And so you would find that in a because they want to, and in some instances, they are not able to move with their qualifications. What it means is that they need to find a quick way to find a certification that can be acknowledged in the country that they are or globally. In that sense, what answers the question that they need is to get a micro credential. It's quick, it's fast, it's recognized. So in that way, you'd find that if you are the kind of person who is always on the move, if you are the kind of person who not out of your own circumstances, but by circumstances that are beyond you, you are displaced, then one of the very quick things that you may want to think about to use to sort of reinforce your relevance in a world of work would be to possibly look at micro credentials. And so for me, that sort of adds up to what the testimonials that have already been shared by the three.
Okay, thank you very much. This is very important. Again, this idea that we can be building effectively lifelong learning and corresponding to a wide range of situations and providing that flexibility comes again also in addressing the situations which are less standard in the thinking of education and training, formal education and training. I ask all of you to be as concise as possible in your responses because we have little time for each of these, to explore each of these themes. Bassem, let me turn to you now, because you know Peter just mentioned a bit of a variety of situations, some of them which are characteristic of low and middle income countries. UNICEF has been developing lots of programs in a diversity of countries. You know, from your experience with this diversity of programs of implementation micro-credentials, what is your experience? Can you give us some examples of what works, what doesn't work? I mean, from what you have been seeing.
Yeah, so thank you so much for the question, Pedro, and it's really great to be with all of you here. So as you said, at UNICEF, our work with microcredentials has shown that when designed well, they can be transformative, as we heard from a lot of the young people as well, and particularly in low and middle income countries. So I'm going to share two concrete examples from our programming that shed a light on some of the breadth and scope of the programming. So the first one comes from Eastern and Southern Africa, where UNICEF and JET Education, James leads that organization, have explored microcredentials as part of the learning to earning pathway sort of continuum in countries like Burundi, Uganda, and South Africa. So one of the key insights is that microcredentials are the most effective when localized, aligned with labor market needs, and supported by wraparound services. So for example, we have a digital platform called Yoma, where youth can access learning and social impact opportunities provided by partners like ones that you're probably familiar with, like Coursera, Atingi, Umuzi, and GIZ. And each opportunity is linked into a verifiable digital credential recorded on a blockchain-based digital CV using self-sovereign identity. We'll talk a little bit about that, giving young people a portable way to showcase their skills, even without a formal degree, and empowering them to pursue opportunities, whether at work or in their communities. The second one, which is also really exciting, comes from the Philippines, where we've been supporting the Department of Education's alternative learning systems that basically targets young people who have left the formal education system to continue their education. And so these are mostly disadvantaged young people. So we conducted a pilot on the micro-credentialing of life skills, where young people were assessed not on just academic knowledge, but on competencies like communication, teamwork, and leadership. Skills employers in the Philippines skills that employers in the Philippines consistently value. And more importantly, employers, especially small and medium enterprises, which I think are the biggest employers in many of the countries we work in, express strong openness to hiring youth with these micro-credentials because they prioritize work ethic and soft skills over traditional degrees, which they themselves can probably provide. So it's a real shift into providing a type of skill, a credentialing of a type of skill that traditionally hasn't been credentialed through micro-credentials. But I want to highlight four quick lessons that our experiences have shown. So the first one is that recognition matters. When micro-credentials are validated by employers or governments, they open doors to real opportunities. Support systems matter. So youth need more than content. They need access to technology, guidance, and sometimes even financial or social support to access these opportunities. Agency matters. Micro-credentials allow the young people to build their learning journeys in ways that are flexible and relative and empowering. And alignment with national systems is really important, because when micro-credentials are grounded in national systems and aligned with labor market needs and embedded in those systems, they can help to bridge the gap between learning and employment. So basically, as one of the young people said, no credential is a silver bullet. We're seeing micro-credentials shift the conversation from what degree do you have to what can you do and show us what you can do. And that's a game changer for many youth. So I hope that makes sense.
This is very, very good. I mean, you mentioned both important sides, labor market alignment on one hand, in fact, three important sides. Then, of course, the aspirations of the young person. And you landed on something extremely important, which is this integration with the national system, with whatever is put into place. These things cannot exist in a vacuum. So, and with this, I turn to Noreen, because Ireland has precisely had great success in achieving this, I would risk saying. And when we look at the Irish system, it's quite impressive. And it not only has achieved what Bassem was mentioning, which is this bridging of training to industry, to employers, but also has managed to successfully meet the needs of people. And I would like to ask you really, where do you think it's working particularly well for youth, and what is it really doing from the Irish experience?
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Pedro, for inviting me here today. So I suppose just first of all, we call the micro-credentials micro-qualifications. And that's really, really important, because that gives a note of currency. And I think a lot of people had mentioned about, ensuring that you have value to the micro-credentialing. So in Ireland, we battled, and we had a little bit of opposition initially at the beginning, because we wanted to call them qualifications. So they are minor qualifications. Now, these minor qualifications are all aligned to our national framework of qualifications. So that means they have currency in terms of our national framework, but also the European educational framework. So we know exactly the unit of learning. And each micro qualification is 50 hours of learning, and that can be made up of the tutor support and the self-directed component. And as some of the individual testimonials from the learners themselves had noted, that we only develop the micro qualifications in kind of priority or critical skill areas. And they are all co-designed with industry, national stakeholders, enterprise bodies, and sectoral partners, so that it does provide value, agility, and relevance. And particularly, this is relevant for youth as well, because as you know, in Ireland, as many European states now, we're in a period of full employment with only 4% unemployment. So in terms of our people at work having the right type of skills to not only do their jobs now, but to bolt on those new and additional skills that are required in terms of AI, robotics, innovation, market development. We have a whole suite of micro qualifications in these key areas to cover sustainability, AI, the digital, the robotics, as I mentioned. And it's really, really important because we know now that whatever skills a person has, they need to be continuously adding to those. So from one, it can provide young people with a starter to dip your toe in the water, avail of a micro qualification. It's 50 hours commitment, so it gets you back into that flow of education if you've been out of it for a while. But equally, in terms of other programs such as apprenticeship programs, it allows us to expand and to add new skill sets because each microqual is accredited in its own right or could be stackable. But equally, we can configure a completely new skill set. So you could take a bit of sustainability, a microqual in AI, one in transversal skills, and you could build a whole new profile for yourself over a period of time. And that incremental learning is validated at each stage.
Thank you, Noreen. I think that the Irish case is a bit of a micro-credential practical encyclopedia. Not all countries can jump immediately to the state of Ireland, but certainly a lot of lessons to learn and process, and we're going to come back to this. I find this impressive how you managed to link, really, to include social partners in the process and how to increase the relevance of credentials. James, so now you have the easy part, huh? You have heard all of this, and I mean, yeah, you come more from the research perspective, right? So you heard all these testimonials, all that has been said. Can you tell us about what are the real areas of impact of micro-credentials? Do they really help youth be more employable? They provide mobility opportunities. What do they do in practice, really?
Thanks, Pedro, and good morning and good afternoon to everybody. I love the input from the young people today. You know, it gives us hope for our globe around what's happening. You know, if these young people can take the leadership role, we have a good time ahead. Let me answer your question, Pedro, and I'm going to start from Noreen's comment. Noreen made the comment that, you know, they talk about micro qualifications and not micro credentials in Ireland. I think this is at the hub of the discussion we're having today, because micro is an easy term to understand. You know, it's small. But why do we call them, internationally at least, micro credentials and not micro qualifications? There's a very important reason, because a credential is not the same thing as a qualification. I can earn a credential on my banking profile. I can have a credential that is linked to my qualification. I can have a credential that is linked to my professional status. So it's as if this concept of credential is bigger than a qualification. And the challenge I would put out to, you know, to our people listening to us today and to our panel members, do we really get this shift, you know? Because if we want to talk about impact, we've got to understand we've got a new phenomenon here. This is something called a micro-credential. There's something about this that lies beyond our qualification framework systems and lies beyond perhaps even, you know, the technology we have today. So when we did this research, you know, we'll talk about it just now, you know, we found some interesting things. But the biggest thing we found is a lot of jargon and hype. And so behind the jargon and the hype, there are not a lot of countries and a lot of organizations that are fully implementing the micro-credentials. Ireland's a nice example, and we'll look at some others today. But I think, you know, if I can leave this panel session today, Pedro, with one kind of top of mind thing for people to debate, a credential is not the same as a qualification. And if we can make this mind shift, you know, we're really into a new, exciting space. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for raising this very important point. And in fact, in the countries where we have been working with constituents, we have been frequently been initiating the discussion around this. So what do you understand by a credential? What do you want it for? Who are you specifically targeting? You know, so all these questions need to be asked for them then to be as empowering and as relevant as they can be. And I find that the Irish case is interesting precisely because relevance comes at the forefront. And so there are regulatory decisions and a number of programmatic decisions done in that direction. Thank you for raising this very, very important issue. And of course, now when we start to actually try to do things, we meet challenges. And the challenges can be of many, many natures, can be that it's difficult to set up the system, can be that the micro-credentials are there or the micro-qualifications are there, but there is no take-up. So Peter, coming back to you and to the voice of youth, I mean, we saw that there seems to be enormous potential, but this potential is not always taken. It's not always there for young people, either because they don't access it or they cannot access it. We have heard about certain barriers, you know, for example, might not be connectivity, etc. What do you think are the real challenges? Are micro-credentials not valued? Can young people not access them? Can you give us your impressions on that?
Yeah, so thank you very much, Pedro. So I think that as good as micro credentials are, they are only good to the extent that we know about them and we're able to access them. And I think that at the heart of what we're trying to understand here is to the extent that young people even know that the micro credentials do exist, and if they do, how they are able to access them. And I think that for what it's worth, you'd find that a lot of young people do not know about the existence.
Yes. Can we have Peter on the camera, please? No. In any event, I mean, it seems that visibility is clearly an issue. Is Peter on? Did he drop from the webinar? Okay, we can go back if he reconnects. Probably he's having some technical difficulty. So perhaps we move on to Noreen. So let's go back to you. While Peter, we cannot find Peter, we cannot find him again. Ireland, it seems, has had, didn't arrive where it is right now. So you had a lot of challenges, a lot of difficulties back and forth in your process. So what were really the major challenges that you faced to implement micro-credentials, and particularly for youth, you know, to make them relevant, as you were saying? What can you tell us something about that?
Well, I suppose first and foremost, Pedro, the concept. So, you know, credentialing is the kind of more common parlance used. And, you know, we wanted to align it to make sure there was the qualification component to give young people and people at work the currency. So we were very insistent about the qualification combination. And then to have it in a format where it was 50 hours of learning. We didn't want to go beyond that. So you could incrementally build up your knowledge base over a period of time, but it was done in chunks of 50 hours of learning. Equally, in terms of creating the collaboration, the strategic partnerships, that was very instrumental in ensuring the relevance component, because we're trying to look ahead, see what are the future requirements of the world of work, and then work backwards. What type of skills do we now need to have in place, and how can we develop micro qualifications to respond to that? So in terms of building the right type of architecture, we would have created strategic partnerships with all the relevant enterprise agencies, all the relevant sectoral agencies, depending on what the area of focus was. And even in terms of the AI suite, we have developed partnerships with Microsoft, with Trinity College Dublin, and other key subject matter experts to make sure that when we get these programs and the micro qualifications out to the market, they are as relevant, they are as modern, and they are suitable for young people to engage in and for employees to avail of. And I think, as Bastien had also mentioned, you know, that there are all those wraparound services to support it. So all of our kind of materials and resources are state of the art to ensure the right type of knowledge checks and supports are in place to facilitate this happening. Another really key component is that we've taken a very targeted approach. So from our micro qualifications, where cost might be a barrier, at our level 4 on the European framework, all of our micro qualifications are free. So they're available. People can just sign up for them within their local education and training board, and they can avail of them. For the level 6, there's a small payment, but for those working in companies, the cost of release is offset against the actual cost. So there's very little to no payment. So we try to factor the barriers, consider those, and in the design process with industry to remove all of those barriers to promote access and participation in the microquals.
So this is in you generated in a way you generated visibility, generated multi-partner engagement, and you've created an enabling environment actually for people to access the so this is good, and it is a bit of a message, isn't it, for policymakers that you can't solve everything through regulation. You need to think then about all the rest that really allows the system to grow. So, James, turning a bit back to you, what do you think is the major, barrier to the development of micro-credentials for youth? What do you think? One, just one, no, two.
So it's a big question, Pedro. I think the regulation point that you just spoke about is pretty important. There was a time in the global education community, and we tried to put everything on NQFs, on qualifications frameworks. And we even use recognition of prior learning to get these non-formal, informal skills onto the formal system. So it's as of this move towards, that the policy framework must be able to accommodate everything has been quite tricky for us in the past. I think technology has caught up and allows us now in the last even the last 5 years to actually bring everything onto one system. So if we talk about policy frameworks, in the European Union, there's been really some interesting moves around this, on micro-credentials specifically. There are some interesting moves on the African continent. You spoke a little bit about Africa just now, but the African Continental Qualifications Framework has even developed a handbook on micro-credentials. And so I can go down the list, of many things about how the regulations are catching up with what is actually happening in the real world. And one of the key things for youth in particular is, when youth do these micro-credentials, are they quality assured? And this is a risk because if youth do these micro-credentials and they have no value to employers because they are not properly quality assured, what are you really sitting with? You're sitting with a credential that does not have currency for you. So what we're finding now is that the policy systems are catching up, and so that the quality assurance of micro-credentials are a big topic. But now the risk is that we use these formal bureaucratic quality assurance processes that are very, cumbersome, and we apply them to just-in-time agile micro-learning. And what happens then is we make the system so not agile, that we really get into trouble. So I think this is the work that I'm doing, at least in Southern Africa now. How do we bring micro-credentials into the formal systems without making them not being micro-credentials, because that's the risk.
Yeah. James, this is so important because I think that's where you need to have a bit of a difference from a lot of the processes that we've had up until now in terms of education, because we cannot simply create a culture of compliance with a set of rules, but we need to work on true relevance. Therefore, the orientation of quality assurance. That's a very good point. Peter, it seems you're back with us. I'm afraid I can't give you too much time, but I would like you to just finalize a bit the points that you were making, just if you can give us some brief points. Yeah. So on the youth, we can't hear you. Maybe are you mute? Maybe you're muted, Peter. We cannot hear you. It seems you're still with some trouble, with some trouble there with. So maybe we'll give you a little bit more time to try to solve that. And okay, just move on to Bassem. Bassem, so you coming again to the experience of UNICEF and the programs of UNICEF. I'm sure also a lot of barriers there. I bet it wasn't all peachy in the implementation. You probably saw a lot of different barriers in different countries. What do you think would you characterize the main barriers that you looked into?
No, thanks, Pedro. So absolutely, one of the clearest takeaways from our work at UNICEF and with partners like with you guys at the ILO, Generation Unlimited, is that the implementation is actually very, very variable, and especially when comparing low and middle income countries with high income countries. For example, in high income countries, micro-credentials are often positioned as agile components. I mean, we heard Noreen, to traditional qualifications, frequently embedded in all sorts of systems, whether higher education systems or corporate upskilling programs. There's typically strong digital infrastructure, higher digital literacy, and a labor market that is increasingly valuing these micro-credentials. So this creates a fertile ground for these to have value and for them to grow. In contrast, and in many low and middle income countries, basically what we see is a bit different. So youth are facing structural barriers such as limited access to digital services, unreliable internet or costly internet, and low exposure to online learning environment. In these contexts, face-to-face learning and community-based delivery of micro-credentials remains essential. And so this was evident in our work in countries like Burundi or Uganda, where programs had to be adapted to accommodate low digital literacy and prioritize offline or hybrid learning formats. There's another important element which is around gender disparities also surface prominently. So in many of the low middle income countries where UNICEF works, young women are less likely to own digital devices, and they face societal expectations that limit their time and mobility. So for micro-credentials to be effective, programs must provide supportive structures, mentorship, flexible scheduling, and even sometimes childcare support to ensure equitable access. So another big differentiator is youth working in the informal sector, so where a lot of the employment happens in low middle income countries, which means that these micro-credentials must align with the informal economy realities and support self-employment, micro-enterprises, and freelance work. For instance, digital platforms like Yoma that I talked about, co-developed with UNICEF, are beginning to explore how youth can earn, showcase, and stack credentials for tasks completed in informal settings or social impact projects. And finally, there are differences in low middle income countries and high income countries in terms of employer recognition. Basically, in high income countries, the private sector, as I said, is much more open to this, but in low middle income countries, awareness among employers is still low, and national qualifications frameworks, as we talked about, are not always ready to accommodate them, which underscores the need for, as we said, policy alignment, employer engagement, and public awareness. So basically, in short, the potential of the micro-credentials is global, but their success is deeply, deeply local. And we must continue adapting programs to local realities, ensure inclusivity across gender and economic lines, and advocate for systems that validate and recognize all forms of learning. You talked about the mechanics, I think, James and Pedro, and I think this will seep into a bit of my next answer to the next question, where I think a lot of the technology and AI can help us with this agility and facilitate sort of removing a lot of the cumbersome mechanics of all the alignment. But I'll stop here and see if you have any reflections.
No, it's fantastic, Bassem. Thank you for bringing this in, because you bring strongly the context of low and middle income countries. In a way, it's a rejoinder with what Noreen was saying about an enabling environment, but an enabling environment looks quite different depending on the context that we are talking about. And of course, we have the gender issues, which are very strong. All these barriers, infrastructural barriers that need to be, of course, surpassed. And thank you for the point on community work. This also connects with the logic of our organization of local economies in low income countries, and what are relevant markets, labor markets in low income countries. And necessarily, these are very important points, focal points for the work also in terms of micro-credentials. Peter, I wonder if you are now able to speak. I hope so.
I believe so. Can you hear me now?
Good to hear you again.
My goodness, it's been a struggle. All right. So let me try to see if I can just answer that tail end of the question. And in fact, I'm not sure to what extent I spoke and at what point I went off. But I think that what has happened today just is one of the barriers. And so I think that in a more practical way, we would know that internet infrastructure, equipment are multiple things that serve as a hindrance. But I think that just because we're aware that micro credentials exist, and just because we know that they are useful, do not translate into tangible outcomes. And so young people have to know about it. They have to know it exists. They have to know the ways that they can access them. And I think that more importantly, they need to be able to understand the ways for which it can be engaged, and to be able to know that if I were to pursue it in this way, private sector, government sector, whichever ways, gives me a pathway for employability. So I do think that there are challenges nonetheless. However, I think that the most significant things would be for young people to be made aware more that pathways like this do exist. But I'm sure that we ourselves as young people also do have a responsibility to be able to learn more about the newer ways for which we can gain qualifications and make sure that our skill sets and competences are recognized. So just because of the time lapse, maybe I'll just end here for the next.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, indeed, we are dashing towards the end, and I think yes, awareness, but also inclusion. Have more and more programs that also develop the skills for people, young people, to autonomously search for these solutions and use them strategically in their day-to-day and in their careers. That's a reflection, I think, also for national development agencies, but also for the international organizations to think about. And we will come to that as well. Now, we have little time before the end, so I'm going to ask you to rush 2 minutes each for your 10-minute answers. So how do we improve? Really, what do we do to improve the take-up, to improve the quality? We've been critical, so what do we do now? So Peter, again, you just spoken. It wasn't the intention that you would speak immediately after you've spoken, but now I think we need to start with you again, with the voice of youth. What do you think the stakeholders that are engaged in this can do better? What can governments do? What can social partners do? What can providers do to improve the situation?
All right. So while it's clear that micro-credentials is for everyone, we'll agree that the bulk of the consumers are young people. And because they are young people, we cannot assume that we know what's best for them in that sense. So what it means is that for micro credentials to uptake in a structured and better way, youth engagement in the decision-making spaces would be very fundamental. And I do think that an example would be the case of the handbook, which has been authored by the African Continental Qualifications Framework, where we had the opportunity as young people to define it, to sort of visualize in what ways we felt that it may be useful to us, and in what ways we believe that if it were structured, it would help us. So I think that, first of all, I would just say that the most fundamental thing would be to engage young people in the spaces that matter, in the spaces where they are able to give their mind and their views about what they imagine would be a useful way for us to disseminate it. And also just to be able to get them to embed what their aspirations are. So in what way do we envisage this in the next 1 year, 2 years? And in what ways do we feel that we want to be engaged? So I think that if that were done, it would serve a very useful purpose.
Thank you, Peter. Excellent. So engage youth, engage youth, engage youth. Don't just talk about it. So James, this is your moment, 2 minutes as well. So so again, it seems we know a little bit to do better, but not too much. So how can we make sure that we're adopting the best practices? How can we learn, in your perspective?
Okay, two quick points, Pedro. I think my first point would be there's a mismatch between the appeal and promise of micro-credentials to youth and what benefit they can actually get. So we must be careful as youth and as policymakers and researchers, what are we trying to sell here? Because there's a lot of hype. And I think there's a risk in that. So as we see national systems catching up, I think we are protecting our public, particularly in low and middle income countries, developing countries. But there is also a risk here. So I don't want to end on a negative note, but we must be careful. There is, in my view, kind of a bit too much hype around this. And sometimes the reality, passes us by. My second point would be perhaps a point we didn't really get to today, but it's the concept of digital identity. Underpinning everything we're doing around micro-credentials and data interoperability is digital identity. It hasn't been a topic for today, and we don't have to talk about it in detail. But if anybody wants to read more about it, read the report that is in the link, because this is the underlying concept that will enable micro-credentials to work across our countries. And we need to understand it, and we need to also understand data privacy that comes with it. There are so many risks around, our data being used, through these micro-credential providers in ways that they're not supposed to. And so, there's protection stuff that I want to caution as my last note. Thanks, Pedro.
Well, thank you very much for that, James, because these are design choices, really, when you are doing it nationally, and how much you go in the direction also of empowering people and having them have ownership and control actually over this information guarantees that you offer. So thank you so much for this point. This is very important. Noreen, I'm sorry, you have a lot to talk about, but again, very shortly.
That's fine.
You represent the government. Of course, governments play a strong role. You already talked a bit about partnerships. What would be your final messages in terms of what really matters? Policies.
I think the three key points for me, Pedro, would be the relevancy. I think a lot of people spoke about that. And you only achieve that relevancy if you have the co-design and the strategic partners working together to kind of see what's coming down the track and to have something in place and have micro qualifications to be able to respond to what those skill gaps are and to have them very focused on matching the gaps with, a very valid skills-focused micro-qualifications. Secondly, I do think the accreditation is really key. We're seeing the value of that in the currency in Ireland. Well, certainly employers value that. And if you're adding on those skills to your current skills, or in the biopharma, we have a huge vacancy rate there. So we're developing micro-qualifications in that space. So I think, that accreditation gives real currency to young people in the labour market. And thirdly, finance. I think finance, in a way, just to support that access piece, that if you're coming into it for the first time and this is your first journey into the lifelong learning route, or if you're adding your skills, cost can often be a barrier for participation. So I think if you're looking at it in the round, there are the three most key components for me: relevancy with co-design with stakeholders, accreditation, and finance.
Fantastic. Thank you. Very clear, very direct. Bassem, lastly for you.
Yes, I'll use 2 minutes quickly to talk a little bit about how, in my vision, AI can potentially add a lot of value to the field of micro-credentials. The first thing is sort of creating customized learning pathways depending on the need or the private sector, and actually imagine a time where young people can create their own learning pathways that are stackable. But then also another exciting use case is building micro-credentials, especially for things like soft skills or that are very focused around certain sectors. So one can imagine the development of these micro-credentials can be made very, very simple and very quick. One can imagine also the training courses can be developed through AI. So imagine yourself practicing communication with an agent that can give you guidance and all that. From UNICEF's perspective, I think there are a couple of things that I would like to highlight that our role is just bringing back to what James said. We must ensure that the deployment of these AI systems and credentials is ethical, inclusive, and rights-based. This means embedding safeguards around data use, transparency, and algorithmic bias, and ensuring that the learners understand how their skills are being assessed and used. And finally, I think we have important role in elevating youth voices, which I was glad we opened this, because they need to have a real big say and not just, tokenism into how we design some of these AI-powered micro-credentials to reflect their reality, aspirations, and their rights. I will stop here.
Well, thank you so much, Bassam, for bringing very clearly the point of AI up as well. And this, of course, and thank you for opening up a gigantic discussion that we would need another webinar to discuss around freedom and options in terms of career design. I mean, we need to be careful so that we don't have sort of co-opted decisions in this future that can be very bright, but we need to be very careful in the way we go for it, and with very deliberate decisions on how we design the systems. So I will just wrap up very quickly. We're really on top of the time. I think we had very important points, and I thank all speakers for the really good participation, good engagement they had with this webinar, which was too short. I think important points that came up is really generate awareness and visibility of micro-credentials for young people, guarantee the quality of these micro-credentials, and try to use as much as possible in the best way possible partnerships to design and to ensure this quality, relevance, and update of these micro-credentials. Also, these partnerships are with everyone. They're with industry, they're with the providers, but they're also actively with young people, as we have seen from this testimonial, so with real engagement, because it's really the young people that we want to, whose needs we want to meet, and the aspirations we want to integrate. And so in this way, we also need to create a type of flexibility that allows young people to truly explore and harness the options and the potential, with the help of AI and all that micro-credentials offer. I think another important point was the generation of an enabling environment. And this means a lot of things, is to surround really the end user with funding, with career guidance, with health support, with transportation, with whatever is necessary to make the micro-credential really an integrated part of the program and, let's say, the project that the person is trying to leverage with the use of micro-credentials, because they are not an end in themselves. And I would end by saying each person is a person, each country is a country. So we are not talking about umbrella solutions that fit everyone in the same way. So I thank you very much for your attention. I thank you for your engagement. And I saw that there was a lot of conversation in the chat, and I just wish I could also have been engaged with that, but one cannot do everything at the same time. And I would ask you before leaving to fill in the webinar evaluation form, please. Otherwise, I will be punished by the organization of the webinar. They're up there. Okay, thank you.